Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, Jacqueline from JP Mint, and Greg the Single Guy, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best kept secret in education. You got it, international teaching. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to a very special episode of the International Teacher Podcast. I'm Kent the Cat Guy, and I'm here with Greg the Single Guy. Hi, Greg.
How you doing, Kent? Look, I love your
This is my midnight DJ opportunity here.
Welcome to.
I'm soft jazz.
We'll be here all evening.
We'll be here all night. Brought to you by Bob's Meats. Thank you very much. I'm also here with JP Mint. Hey, JP.
Hello from Canada.
That's right. You're in Canada. And it only took you 30 hours to get there this year?
Only 17 hours from
Only
Mexico.
17 hours. Welcome to the Great North, as they say.
What are we going to do on this episode,
the
Kent?
Great White North.
Yes, we have a very special episode. And at any minute, our long-lost fourth host from the Beatles will be joining us.
Fab
Matt,
Four.
The Fab Four. Matt, the Family Guy, might do a little drop in here. And if he drops in, we'll drop everything and we'll say good evening to Matt, the Family Guy. But until then, we are going to talk to each other and we're going to interview and get to know each other a little bit, because I work with Greg on the podcast. I see him every day at work. But the question is, what do I really know about Greg? So this ITP crowd is your opportunity and mine to find out more about your hosts, Greg, JP Mint, and myself, Cat the Cat Guy. Are you with me, Greg and JP Mint?
We're with you. Woo!
So, all right, I think we're going to go about 10 minutes or so. And this is our chance to get to know Greg, the Single Guy.
So feel
Greg,
free to fast forward.
That's not nice.
And
What's that?
And we're done with Greg. We're moving on to JP Mint.
10 minutes, folks.
I'm so tired.
Listen, if you're listening to the podcast, jump over to the YouTube and you can see three people who are ready for a winter break. All right. Okay. So I am going to spend just a few minutes here talking to Greg, the second most handsome guy on the podcast. So, Greg, where are you from, buddy?
If you're
Green
looking on
Bay.
YouTube,
No, I don't think you were
podcasters.
born in Green Bay. I know that you have
I
your...
was born in Milwaukee about 100 years ago.
Green Bay is sort of your heart city, but you were born in Milwaukee.
Well, before I lived where I am now, I've only been in, one place for a couple of years at a time in my life. Traveled around a lot. I was an Army brat and stuff. I was born in Milwaukee, in West Allis. People say West Allis, Dallas. Oh, I love Dallas. I'm like, no, it's West Allis of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Did you grow up there? Did you spend your first 5 years of life in that area?
Nope. We were Army brats, so we went around with mom and dad and all over, bases and stuff around the U.S. and a little bit in Germany, and came back. I think throughout my early years, I was always a globetrotter sort of thing,
Do you want to tell the ITP crowd what your dad did in the Army?
No. Anyway, just kidding. Of course, yeah. He's an oral surgeon. He works on jaws and stuff like that. So
every time I talk to Dr. Married Guy, Greg's father, I open my mouth and say, can you take a look at this?
Yeah.
So I don't know what gesture I just made there. I apologize deeply.
You're weird tonight, but that's okay. We love you anyway, Kent.
Okay, so you grew up, you traveled around the world. Where'd you go to high school?
Well, by that time we had gone back to Wisconsin, so that's why I call Wisconsin home, because after traveling around a while, my dad opened up his own practice in Green Bay. We went back there because of family and stuff, right? So after that, and I went to school around that area too for college, for like 8 years. But anyway, then I started teaching and went overseas, and that was the joy of my life.
There was some kind
over all that other stuff.
Cartoon,
How long do we have?
Cartoon Disney thing in the middle there.
Right?
Animation.
Sort of like yada. So
I talk for hours about what I
the
did.
ITP crowd will know Greg the Single Guy as this nice, funny, second funniest guy in the show, but pretty funny. They'll know him as a very
Funny
knowledgeable, a dedicated teacher, a musician, not afraid to cry. Is that what you've always been like? Were you like that as a kid?
I used to be afraid to cry.
And now it's all heart. Now it's
I've always
all
been funny.
heart and
Always
soul.
been funny. Always been
Always been
heart and
funny?
soul. Not as funny as you, Kent. I've
Yeah.
never had that kind of a career, but I grew up in a great family, and we had
Yes.
we have a lot of fun in my family. So there are a lot of jokesters. My dad's a jokester quite a bit, and it just sort of rubbed off on me. So it makes good for teaching. It makes good for teaching.
Yeah. So tell me, were you in high school dreaming of being a teacher? Did you always think,
Hell no.
did
No,
you
I
think
never
you were going
wanted
to
to
be a
be a
dentist?
teacher.
Did you think you'd go to the army? What was
No.
high school Greg thinking about in the future?
Never had the brains for any of that stuff. I didn't even care about the future. I was thinking about, the next girlfriend. I was thinking about the next party. I was thinking about all those things. I did not have a future planned out. I was waiting for something to happen. I really, I was into music quite a bit, as far as like playing music, as far as singing, stuff like that throughout high school, even into college. But no, nothing ever. I even graduated from college without a plan, without any idea what to do. And I grew up like 10 years after everybody else. So after my age of that, most people at 20 know at least an idea what they're going to do after college. I had no clue. Never did.
So there you are. You're a mid-20s single guy, Greg, and you haven't dedicated your life to education yet. So what was the thing that made you decide, you know what, maybe education is my thing?
Well, I was working for Bugs Bunny, actually. I was working in those stores, like the Disney stores, like JP was alluding to. And I loved cartoons. I hated retail. I never wanted to work at a mall, but they opened up one of those Warner Brothers stores this is like 93, and they opened up a store in Minneapolis at the Mall of America. So I started working there, and it was just a blast. I was the best, and I was the best part-time employee. And they said, Greg, we want you to go to Texas. So I started into management, and for the next 4 years, I was selling cartoons. And what got me into teaching was that my favorite part of being in the store, besides the cartoons, it was actually a store and a business. So I actually went up in through management. And the one thing I liked most about it was teaching other people to do what I was doing. So to teach your other assistant employees, your assistant managers to become the manager for when you're done. And magically around Christmas time one year, 97, I think, I got fired. So I decided, I think I'll take teaching somewhere else. Oh, yeah, no kidding. I dodged a big bullet, They closed the stores in 99 anyway.
Without you, they didn't stand a chance, single guy.
No, it went downhill after me.
Tell the ITP crowd, do you make more money in your last year doing retail or your first year as a teacher?
Oh, I think I made half as much money as a teacher if you talk about salary. I was making food stamps my first year teach. I was in Honduras, right? So fast forward, I went through college a little bit more to be teacher, went to Honduras for my first gig, and that's what got me started. And that's the whole reason this podcast even started. I just love international teaching. It started in Honduras. And I went through a number of another bunch of countries too. I'll put it that way. I don't have enough time to tell you everything, but I went through job fairs. I went to the UNI fair, the University of Northern Iowa, and then I went to that twice, and I went to teach in Honduras and Egypt and Kuwait. Then I went to Cambodia. Then I went to Venezuela. Then I went to Switzerland, and now I'm in Saudi. So that was my short list of schools and experiences.
People on the podcast can always go back and hear lots of bits and pieces of your adventures overseas. What are the things that you've taught over the years?
In a nutshell, I was always elementary up until Venezuela. I was teaching elementary homeroom, and then I went in to be I wanted to have a stronger resume, so I went into technology. And that's usually the school that would ask me to teach tech, because after a while they realize here's this homeroom teacher that teaches tech also, or should be teaching tech. And then I end up in the tech role. So, and then later on in life, and so the other schools, it's been 25 years now. And about halfway through that, I started marketing myself as technology. So worked into schools that were all the way the specialty from K through, even pre-K through 12 and stuff like that, right? And I'm so glad, the thing is, Kent, that's great about this is that our podcast listeners have been on for years, but we haven't told our stories. And I was one of the first two with Matt, and Matt, the Family Guy. He and I interviewed each other in episode 2 and 3. But we haven't talked about it since then.
That's
so
okay. Nothing has happened to you since then. So
no, it's all
just
exactly
go back
the same.
And listen to that interview.
Everything's the same except for you. You and JP.
And JP,
you and JP.
Listen, when you're a tech guy, a lot of people that we know who have been the tech people, tech guys, tech gals, the pressure to leave education and enter the tech world is always there. What is it about education that keeps you coming back year after year, even though you might have a set of skills that would allow you to go in many different directions?
Oh, that's an easy answer right there. It's the kids and it's the teachers.
Not this week, it's not. I've
No,
seen them
not
this
this
week.
week.
There's no way. Week
No.
before winter break.
I know. But no, I think being with students, I don't think I could do anything else in my stage of life right now that would make me happy. I think being in front of the students and making a difference over the years has kept me in education. But the technology, I mean, who wants to go work for a technology firm? I don't think people are always happy doing that stuff. And you can even tell from the people that work in some schools that are technology, right? The technology ed tech guys or the support guys, they don't always know about teaching anyway. So I guess the goal is to always be a teacher first and a techie second. So I love it, man. You see me every day, Kent. I love teaching and I love having kids just laugh and walk up to you and go, "You're going to die someday." Like a little kindergartner, a little sixth grader goes, 6-year-old goes, "You're going to die, Mr. Armura." And I'm like, first of all, I'm not Mr. Armura. That's Mr. Armura in grade 4. That's the guy down the hallway, the real loud guy.
You know, what's funny is that 6-year-old and my GP say the same thing.
I know, right?
I know some of the story because Greg and I, if the ITP crowd doesn't know, we've worked together for, it feels like 100 years, but it's probably closer to 8 or 9 years now. Can you tell the ITP crowd, and maybe even JP, Mint, the origins of the ITP? I don't know if everyone knows the story.
Well, Kent the Cat Guy, you and JP were added on after Matt and I started in 2021, and we had just got together. It was the same time that I had this 4th grade teacher named Kent Armura asking me about podcasting for students. But at the same time, I had Matt Judd say to me, "Hey, we should just do a podcast about teaching overseas. We love talking." So I was like, okay, we'll get some guests. Maybe we'll just talk between us and no one's going to listen to us. But we did. We started doing that. And we had you on in the first season, I think. And you introduced yourself a little bit, and we'll go back to you in a second. And then we had JP on, and she was like one of our earlier guests also. And then she came back on again, didn't you, JP? Episode 50. So that was 57 episodes ago, right? But the origin of this was just 2 guys saying, "Let's just talk." And we had 2 parrots looking at each other with a microphone, added the 2 cat eyes behind the 2 parrots after a while. And JP was watching this all transform. And then we had at JP, we put a little mint box around our logo. So it's been a lot of fun, man. And I can't tell you, I appreciate having you guys on here so much because of your stories, right? So that's enough about me. I mean, I taught.
No, I'm not done. You don't end the interview. I end the interview. You're not done.
You're in charge.
We've recently celebrated.
She's the boss.
Oh, okay, so we've recently celebrated our 100th episode. We're on now almost 120 or something. I don't count you. That's your job. You got another 100 in you, single guy, another 150? Tell the ITP crowd right here, right now, are you in for another 150?
Well, I tell you what, it doesn't matter what you guys think. I'm going to be going for the next about 10 years or so because they're not going to kick me out of the job. And this is, we own this. We started this podcast. So I don't know. Even if they offer us millions of dollars, we're going to keep going with the ITP. And I hope you two stay on with us.
Hold on a second. Can we just go back? If we get offered $1 million, we're pledging to the ITP crowd that we're going to keep this project going.
I am. You don't have to. You can monetize your middle part of your video if you want, but I'm pledging to these guys.
I suspect there'll be sponsors all around it. Now, hold on. We're not quite done with you, single guy. We're not done with you. Do you imagine yourself? Please, we are not here to make money. And if you appreciate that, please send a check to each of the hosts. Send money to keep this project free. Okay. So, but anyway, we have one more thing that we've got to say to the audience. You've now written 2 books. You are not just Greg the single guy. You are Greg the multiple book author. I'm not quite ready to say it's the best-selling author, but one of these days it will be. Tell us just a few words. Have you?
I'm sorry, did the listeners not hear that?
Do you have another book? First of all, let me tell the audience, we have the most recent book is called International Teaching, the Best Kept Secret in Education. International Education, the
Hey,
best
still
kept
kid.
secret
It's in the
in
title.
teaching by Greg Lemoyne, MD, PhD, CPA, DDM, DVM, and Phil D. Available at www.amazon.com or wherever you buy your finer books. You got another book in your future, Greg?
First of all, it's the same tagline as it's on our website for the podcast, the best kept secret in education. That's just the tagline, the secondary title, right? An educational teaching, right? Oh my God,
I haven't
international
learned our
teaching.
email address yet, so I'm working
You're
on
screwing
that.
me up, yeah.
Yeah, you got another book for us?
I do, yeah.
Awesome.
It's going to be, I've done 2 books now. One was straight up me. One was AI helped. This third book that I did was a photo book of underwater photography that I gave to family. I didn't publish it anywhere. I published copies of it for my family. And the fourth one, or if I call it the fourth one, I'm going to write. It's already in my head. I haven't published it yet. I need to get the artist, Ellie. Do you remember our art teacher? She's going to illustrate it for me.
As a matter of fact, the co-author of her book, I'm going to meet with briefly next week. So
Really?
Ellie wrote a book with a co-author from Hungary, and I'm going to say hello to her next week. Yeah.
Well, I'm doing a children's book, and I don't have the name for it yet, but I'm going to do a children's book because I love picture books and stuff like that, right? And that's a challenge because elementary is not easy to do, but even in through middle school and high school, I've taught classes where I teach using a picture book. So I want to write a children's book. And it's already written itself, basically, after so many years teaching. So thank you for asking, Kent.
Thank you, Greg. You heard it here first, ITP crowd. Keep your eyes out for children's book by Greg Lemoyne. Did I get that?
I love it. I love our listeners must realize that you have butchered every time you've mentioned a book or introduced me. You butcher the name of the podcast. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in your brain, aren't there?
You know what? There's many of me in here. Greg, the single guy, thank you for spending a few minutes.
I love it.
Tonight.
Yeah, I went overtime a little bit, but I do want to ask JP if she has any questions before we move on to her.
Well, I was going to segue into, let's get more into that brain of Kent Aramura. So I would like to know, Kent, what was it about this podcast that made you think, yeah, okay, I won't be behind the scenes. I'll be part of the interviewing and the talking.
Yeah. JP Mint, I'm always one for the stage. If you put a spotlight out, I'm the first one who will walk into it. You put a microphone up. I don't have anything of value to add to anything, but I'll just jump on the stage. For me, when I back, people will know I was an amateur stand-up comic, and that feeling of terror and excitement all bundled into one is, I think, an amazing feeling. I love it. And this podcast, and the ITP podcast, if that's what we are indeed called, is a chance to connect with an audience, a chance to connect with you and Greg and Matt, as well as, I think, just kind of have a moment in that spotlight again. It's nice.
All right. So let's go back and let's talk about Kent and where you started. So where were you born?
I was going to try something first because he used to be a comedian. Would you ever see that red light and you have to get off stage, Kent?
Yeah, you can use that.
Do they still do that? So I'm going to start doing that. If you get too annoying, I'm just going to do this. So listeners
the light
on the
comes up,
podcast,
you get 60 seconds
light.
to wrap up, or you don't get invited back.
Is that a real thing, Kent?
Yeah, that's a real thing. The red light, of course. I keep an eye on it. But
I never knew that.
I always keep to my time. Okay,
well,
that's
we don't have any time on here. There's no time on here, so that's all about you, Kent. Kent, you know what? Let's do that. JP, do you want to continue with interviewing Kent, and then we'll dig into you a little bit, okay?
Yep.
Go ahead.
So
continue.
I'd like to know, Kent, did it start in Seattle?
I grew up in the suburbs of Seattle. I was born in Bellevue, Washington, which is now amazing.
It's still Bellevue.
It's huge. I mean, it's just grown up. The whole Pacific Northwest, where I grew up, has blossomed. I grew up on a little island just across the floating bridge from Seattle. It's called Mercer Island, and it's kind of a fancy suburb. But honestly, when I lived there, it was just your pretty much run of the mill. My father he grew up in California. His family, 9 brothers and sisters and parents, they were interned as a Japanese family during World War II. And so my father's family was put in Jerome, Arkansas, into an intern camp there. And he spent 3 years there as a small child. He was 3 years old. So my father grew up in the Midwest. Once they got relocated, they lost their family land in California. where he had grown up first 2 years of his life. And then he had settled in Missouri. He had met my mother in the Midwest. He became a physicist. They moved out to the Pacific Northwest. He took a job there. And that's where my older brother, who's 5 years older than myself, and then my little brother, who's 9 years younger, that's where we all became established.
3 boys in the family. And
3 boys.
Your mom's from the Midwest. Is she of Japanese descent as well?
No, she's Irish and German. You know, it was an interracial marriage in the 1960s, which was still, for the Midwest, a little bit, like, can I say, edgy in the United States? Yeah.
Were you conceived at like a Neil Diamond concert like I was, I think?
Yeah. turn on the heart light. Turn on.
Are we brothers from another mother? I think so. We're both middle children.
We're both middle. We both have 2 brothers, right? I think we have the same.
Explains a lot. Yeah.
Setup explains a lot.
How does JP put up with us? That's all.
She doesn't. She really.
Good question, though, JP.
Ken, did you go to high school also in that island off of Bellevue?
Yeah, Mercer Island. I went to high school there, and I graduated from there. I don't think it was anything remarkable. Then I went to the University of Washington up the highway, I-5 highway there, and I studied microbiology and biochemistry and worked in a laboratory, which I do. I do love science. I have a personal love of science. At that point, I thought it might be my career. But then I did it for a while, and it's a fairly lone, all 3 of us are social people, which is probably why we're in education, we're podcasting. The life of a scientist is a little more subdued, a little bit more lonely, a little bit longer hours at night doing the things that they do. And thank goodness that we have people who are dedicated and good at this stuff. We need solid science, but it really wasn't going to be my life's passion.
I can't picture him as doing that. Can you, JP?
I wasn't great at it. I don't love to measure things. A little bit there, a little bit there. And apparently in science, there's a big need for being sort of accurate. So I did start studying, I started working on history and philosophy of science, which ultimately became my passion, which probably pushed me in the direction of education eventually. Graduated finally from the university. I was faced with trying to get a job, and I became a paraprofessional. Right? I started working in a school over there on Mercer Island, and I really enjoyed it. And I started going to night school in the city of Seattle for education. I'm in my 30s at that point, and I really loved it. And that was the beginning of my teaching career. Taught 3 years in the States, went overseas.
How did you know about this paraprofessional? Because this is a term that I've just started to learn.
So it's a teaching assistant. I think the paraprofessional really, at least in Washington State, means that, well, you have a degree, but you're still kind of an assistant teacher. Whereas
they don't have to pay you very much.
Yeah, they don't pay, but it's usually, if you are a teaching assistant. Yeah. And so I was in charge of playground duty and one-on-one supervision and just kind of wherever, behavior things.
I thought
wherever
people,
you need
jumped out of planes when they say they're paraprofessional. I was like, you're jumping out of paraprofessional. That was before I was a teacher. I didn't understand the word
Some
like
days
a police officer jumping out of a plane, paratrooper.
Or a paraplegic or something. I'm like, where does this para come from? I'm like,
Okay,
seriously,
so
I don't get it.
I would like to officially apologize. I know there's the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that's going to reach out to us and ask us to do a little bit of a promotion for their materials. And so I deeply apologize.
Edit this. Yeah. We always send out our apologies to our listeners that are with us quite a bit. We do joke around a lot about things like that, but we haven't written one letter yet.
So,
that I know.
Kent, when you officially got your teaching certificate, did you have some years of teaching in Seattle before you headed overseas, or did you just hop on a plane?
I worked up in Everett, which is about 25 miles north of Seattle. 20 miles north of Seattle. And I got a job there. I did my student teaching in the Everett School District, and I was lucky enough to get a job because 2005 was my first year teaching as a certified teacher. It was kind of a downturn for education, at least in Washington State. So I felt like I was really lucky that I got offered a position at that time because they were just starting 2- and 3-year hiring freezes in Washington State and many of the districts. So I really feel like I've been lucky with my timing and the people who've helped me in my career.
And then what got you looking overseas?
So I was studying Arabic. I had an Arabic teacher. I mean, this is not like some story about it's a calling for life. My Arabic teacher mentioned that, he was from Yemen, and he mentioned that there was an American school there. His brother lived in Yemen, and he's like, you know what, you'd probably really love Yemen. And so I thought about it, and I thought, you know what, maybe I would. And so, it was about this time of year. It was the middle of December when I decided to see, well, let's just apply to that school in Yemen and find out what happens. And it turns
there was
out they
somebody
were
else on this decision too, right? Who
Yeah, I
else
was
was
gonna say,
there?
where's
the,
Mrs.
the
Cat?
cat was part of it
The
too. Absolutely.
cat.
And they were the school that was hiring was just in Seattle the day before I emailed. So they flew me out to Idaho where they were. It's a QSI school. So they flew me out to Idaho to have a quick interview. And that's how I had already been teaching for 3 years in the States. And I was really curious about Yemen. And my wife and I moved to Yemen the next year.
Wow.
Love that
So-
story.
And two
Love
cats.
that
We
story.
took
And the
two cats
cats.
with us.
Yeah, of course. You're Kent the cat guy. All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all four of us at the ITPexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a new Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at ITP Expats. That's with an S. ITP Expats is our handle.
All right, and thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners, and though we're not monetized, we are here for you, and we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show.
You back us up a little bit and just let us know, at what point did you have Mrs. Cat? When was Mrs. Cat in the picture?
Mrs. Cat and I have been a thing since, I don't want to get this wrong, I think 1997 is when she finally gave in. She lifted the restraining order and the rest was history. So
back before you became a teacher.
Yeah, back then when I met her, I was, before...
Back when he had hair.
I was a metal worker, a welder. I was a metal fabricator. I worked at a science center making exhibits. They were fun years. And Miss Cat we worked together at a science museum, setting up museum exhibits and building them. And it was a lot of fun. It just was not sustainable. 9/11 happened during those years and our funding dried up and we just couldn't sustain that project.
And she was more than willing and happy to move overseas as a trailing spouse and follow you and say, yeah, let's do this together.
You know what? She was really into it. And she was really, I think looking back, she would admit that Yemen is not the best atmosphere for her as a woman. We both agreed that my experience was much more fulfilling because it was freedom in the public square, whereas most women don't have that same sort of freedom in Yemen. So I would say that looking back on it now, her experience wasn't quite as positive as mine. I loved my experience, but I do understand that it was easier as a male for me.
And now you're in a very nearby country.
Yeah.
With what in the future? Are you thinking you would continue into a different continent, a different country?
Well, the country I'm in now is a 60 years old and out. And of course, my boss looks at me and says, are you ready? Are you ready? And so we don't have any firm plans. I mean, I think that Miss Cat looks forward to the process of repatriation, or she dreams of Asia or Europe. And I'm always trying to say that, well, we do have a mortgage and we have a pretty good paycheck right now. So, we should write it, and it's a great job. I love my job. Just like the single guy said, we really love the students we work with and the people we work with, and it's a great job. And so there's kind of a wait and see attitude.
And the school loves him. I mean, the kids just love him to death. Although they do get confused between us. They do love me and they think that he's me.
After 9 years, there are still some teachers who don't know we're two people.
Exactly. He's just a little louder. But I can see Kent staying here and Carla staying here for another 5 or 6 years for some reason. That's just me. And it's hard for him to say. I've asked him so many times, right, Kent? Like, what are you guys doing? I don't know. We'll see.
I think over the last 10 years, and it was funny because the first couple of years I was here, when there was someone who reach a certain age, are retired, or left the school, you can remember all of their names and all of their faces, and you're like, wow, I can't believe that they're moving on. They've reached a certain age. But now there are so many people over the years that we've said goodbye to. I can't even count them anymore. And so I've said this before, international teaching, you would think that the more years you've been around, just the more people you know, but the less people you know because everyone else has left.
Well, I, for one, am excited to see what happens, and you know where to go when you're recruiting. And I'll have a special deal for you.
Listen, JP Mint, Greg and I often talk when we're just hanging out, and we are so grateful that you've been part of this project. And we hope if it has 200 more episodes, we hope you're part of every single one of them. Thank you, JP Mint.
There's no if. There's going to be more than 200 episodes.
Not if my doctor has this. Or that 6-year-old.
For that 6-year-old.
The 6-year-old, you're going to die sometime. Man, all right, Kent, let's get a little bit into the background of JP. Our listeners have been listening to you for a long time now. I think you're with us over a year, right?
Yes, our 1-year anniversary as co-host was sometime in September, October, so like end of September, beginning of October. It flew by without us even realizing that, there was a 1-year anniversary in there somewhere. We've been busy. I've been loving reconnecting to a lot of friends, reaching out to friends and asking them to come on to the show. And yeah, for a while there, we were doing an episode every week and recording more than that, of course, recording sometimes 3-4 times in a week and then banking those episodes. But I'm happy to say we've slowed down a little bit. We've recalibrated our priorities to more of a life-work balance. And so now we are back to publishing every 2 weeks. And I, for one, am still loving listening to the episodes. I haven't quite moved over to the YouTube platform. I don't know about you guys.
Yes, you have. You just haven't been listening for
been
months
on
now.
it, but I haven't been watching it.
You haven't seen any of these, have you?
I'm a subscriber, so, I'm doing my part. But no, I still love to walk and listen to us and listen to you guys, listen to old episodes. And I for one, would love to continue on this. This is part of the best part of my week when we have an episode. And getting an email this morning reminding me that we're having a podcast episode, I was like, yes, I somehow missed that. We didn't get that in the calendar, but it is always a favorite time of my week when we get to come together and see each other.
Well, you joined us quite a long time ago. It was in like the second season in the fees, I think, of the episodes that you joined us. And I think it'd be great if we refreshed. And the reason we're doing this episode is to reintroduce us a little bit for new listeners and to remind other people that they can go back into our episodes and meet each one of us and hear our stories more in depth. Like Kent's story about walking to school and stopping because of a tank, right, in Yemen on the way to school. That was an old episode, right? I had to go back and listen to that. And with you too, JP, we can go back and listen to all those episodes, at least 2 episodes with you as the featured guest. Since you have become one of our co-hosts, you've added so much to our show. But let's talk a little bit more about you and get your history. And because you have gone from just teaching to admin and now post-education and retirement. So you have so much to share with us. Can you give us a nutshell of where did it all start for you? I'm going to guess Canada.
It did. It started in northern Canada, where both my parents were bankers, and they were moved up north.
Hi, JP's mom.
Hi, Mom. And I always pictured, that small town sign saying home of JP Mint. Someday that
would the last person turn out the lights as they're leaving.
Hearst, Ontario is going to have home of JP Mint. But yeah, I was born up there, but I've never been back since maybe 1 year old we moved. My dad was a manager, and so we moved around the province a little bit. But I still call Ottawa hometown. That's where I went to public school or elementary school, middle school, and 1 high school. And then my mom became a bank manager, and we started to move thanks to her career. So then I went to 3 different high schools. So I moved around the province quite a bit. And I think that's where I got this love of constantly moving and constantly new adventures and new geography. So when I had the opportunity to go overseas as a high school student and study German, I jumped at it. And that's when I fell in love with new cultures, new languages. I thought, geez, if this was fun for 3 months, what would it feel like to live overseas, for
Hey, where were
years?
you in Germany when you were there?
Zwischen Münster und Osnabrück in Nordrhein-Westfalia.
She sounds like she's from the Sound of Music. She's Austrian or something. Not Australian.
No.
There's no kangaroos there. I mean, there's no kangaroos in Austria. No, that's
so
great.
in
Yeah.
Northwest Germany, and that I should add, that was 1989. So I was the last Canadian cohort that got to see the Berlin Wall. And then 3 months
Wow.
later, it was gone.
I didn't know we had that kind of a background because in 86, 87, I was there in Germany, in Berlin, and I did graffiti on the wall. So, I mean, I was a little bit earlier than you were. And I know that we both speak German, and it was the start of a Wanderlust, I guess, the wanting to wander around the world, right? Globetrotting. But it's exciting. I knew that we all three have this lust for travel and liking, Kent's a little bit different story. You and I both have a story of moving around quite a bit. That's why I've always loved hearing from Kent's point of view. But from a woman's point of view, from you going from living overseas, did you go to Canadian college for teaching or did you do something else before that?
So in Canada, there's a couple ways we can become teachers. The concurrent education program, where you go out of high school and straight into a teaching program, is very highly competitive and you need really good grades. And I wasn't a great student in high school because I had a boyfriend and I had a part-time job. And I was like,
Went to Germany.
I got lots going on. So I did a 4-year degree in French, German, and Spanish. And then I went to teachers college for 1 year. Now that program is 2 years, but at the time it was 1 year. So I did a 4-year degree, and then I did a second degree that was a teaching college.
French, German, and Spanish. You'd wake up in the morning and wonder, what language am I going to think about today?
And
Holy cow.
I am presently in my best friend's house, who was my college roommate, my university roommate at that time. We were the only language majors in our whole dormitory. And we were put together, and I thought, this is a recipe for disaster. Because we're in every class together and we live together, but it's forged the bond. And, 30 years later, we're still best friends.
So did you hang out with like scientists like Kent was?
Actually,
it was
you must business and economics university. It was known for its business and economics. And so all my friends became business people and I was a language teacher. And so
here's the question then.
different.
How did you get overseas then? How did you break out of the whole Canada thing? I love those questions.
So I graduated from my teacher's college and I knew I wasn't ready for a Canadian classroom. I thought I was really nervous about stepping into that area. I had done the practice teaching and I saw that I was getting eaten alive. And I thought, I just need to go overseas and learn a little bit more about who I am as a teacher. And so I went to Korea and I taught in an English school, the English Academy, after school hours. And I loved it. I was there for a year, and then I became an instructor at a community college. The thing with Korea in the 90s is if you completed a 1-year contract, you were gold. You showed some dedication and some perseverance. And so a community college actually headhunted me and said, we want you to teach English to our community students, like 18, 19-year-olds. And so I stayed there for 2 years, and I had a blast. But I wanted to go into the international teaching world, international schools. We had a guest, John, from the UK, Ireland, somewhere. I'm sorry, John. No, Scotland. Wasn't he Scottish?
Scottish.
John,
was
if you're out
Scottish.
there, call in, John.
Call in,
the
John.
show.
Oklahoma. Tell us you're okay.
Blink
So
twice, John, if you could speak.
John's story paralleled mine in the sense he was an ESL teacher in Thailand and he wanted to get into this international teaching gig, and how to do that was, how to transfer. So I wanted to do that as well. I applied to some very good schools, not knowing anything about international teaching. And a lot of them wrote me back very nicely saying, you don't have experience teaching French. You need to go home and teach French.
My God, that's funny.
And I thought, okay, they make a good point, but I am French Canadian. So I went home and I taught for 3 years. And then that's when I went overseas. So I had the experience. I already had the overseas experience from teaching ESL. And now I had, everything was lined up. With 6 years under my belt, I got some great job offers and some great contracts. And so that was the start of my international career.
Did you go through Queen's University that
Yes.
time when you did recruiting your first time?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was Queens. It was just down the road from Ottawa, so very close. And I gotta tell you, I got goosebumps walking into that exposition hall with all those desks lined up. They have the chart paper behind them with all the jobs that are listing, and you could see lines crossing through as they were getting hired. And I thought the world is open, like anywhere in the world I could go as long as they had a French teaching job.
Right.
I could apply and go there. So that was really exciting.
So you did middle school or high school or both?
I started out, so in Canada, I started out as a K-8 French teacher. And my first teaching job overseas was in Turkey, and I was hired as a middle school teacher, so 6, 7, 8. And then while I was there, the high school was expanding. They were expanding from grade 9, 10 all the way to grade 12 in languages. And I asked to move up. And so after 3 years in middle school, they said, yes, we'll take you into the high school. And so it was a different building and everything, same campus, but different building. So I went and I taught grade 9 and 10. So a lot of my students, actually, they knew me from 6, 7, 8. So I moved up with them. And then after 3 years of that, I said, I'm leaving. It was 6 years. It's time to move on. I didn't want to settle in Turkey. But then they offered me the head of department position. And so I signed a contract for 2 more years. So I stayed 8 years at that school.
But you didn't just stop at head of department either. I mean, at some point, lead us on a little bit. Here you went up to another school then, and you were in admin, right?
So I went to another school in Oman, and I stayed there 7 years. But at that point, I realized that I had sort of hit the not penultimate, but the ultimate teaching job. I was making my own curriculum, my own program. I was seeing kids start French and finish fluent. And I felt like, what more can I do? And that's when I started to look towards maybe going into admin. And so I spoke with my mentor and former guest, Keith Boniface,
That's
on
right.
episode
Hello, Keith.
something.
Shout out to Keith. Yep.
And he said, why don't you look at becoming a high school principal? And so I did my master's in the summers and sort of online and through TCNJ, the College of New Jersey. And that was in Mallorca in the summertime. So, a bit of a hardship. Yeah, a little hardship summers in Spain, doing my master's. And then at that point, my mentor, Keith, said, don't forget, now you're starting over. And I did have to start over because now I was no longer a top teacher. I was a no experience admin. And so to get my foot in the door, that's when I headed to China and did some VPs, vice principals, and then I got a principalship in Mexico. And that's where my story took a bit of a turn, where I realized, I just don't think I want to keep working for somebody else. I want to invest my time into what I want to do and help people more on an individual basis rather than a big school or a big classroom. I can now help teachers find jobs. And so that's what
we love about you, JP, is that you have such a rich history of so many different levels and waypoints to help so many people from teaching at an English school to going, the whole every step of the way you've gone up and up and up. And then restarted, and now you're retired. You were retired at 50, and now, it's fantastic. I love having you on the show because there's so much to offer our teachers and our listeners, right?
Well, and now I get to live vicariously through my clients, their job search, their interviews. I get to use my network to help people find those positions, or I use my network for information. If I have a client that is applying somewhere and I know somebody that works there, then I put them in contact. So I don't feel the need to go out there and find the jobs or work in these schools because I get to live vicariously through my clients.
And they're coming to you too. I think the word is getting out about JP Mint, and we've seen you grow. Your business has grown for years, and it's been really exciting to see that you've been part of our show. We don't focus on your business in the show because it sort of goes hand in hand together. It's all about, right, Kent? We talk about things, we share things, and we teach other listeners, hopefully, and share with our listeners the things that JP helps other people achieve. But we don't necessarily talk about it on the show because there's no reason. We're not a monetized show.
No,
but you do
and I didn't want
separated.
this to be the JP Mint Consulting sponsored by. Although
it's the
we've
Kent Aramura
never
show.
talked about that, but JP Mint could sponsor an episode in the future.
This segment has been brought to you by jpmintconsulting.com.
Next
Please
show, we're all
send
going to
money.
be
Sign up jpmintconsulting.com to keep this program free for the listener.
We need
you to sign up now.
We need some hats, JP. We don't do any advertising whatsoever. We're all
JP
wearing
Mint
JP
crested,
Mint shirts and everything, and brought to you by.
Checks in the mail, folks. The checks in the mail.
The checks in the mail.
But I like the way it crosses over into our family of listeners, right? With educators going global, and we've got the number of the tie online has been a great success story for us as well. Having ISS and Scroll on here, our listeners get so much from so many different points. It's not a focus on one part of international teaching or admin or schools. It's all of it. And I love that about our show because we don't script it. We have people on that we don't even know, and we get to know them over our conversation. Right, Kent?
That's right.
Kent's a little quiet for right now.
Oh, I was giving you the opportunity to ask the questions.
Thank you, Kent. I think I'm pretty. Do you have any questions for JP, Kent? Because I'm pretty good. I think we've gotten a good grasp.
We've got a great idea. I mean, we've got to know her personally as a co-host over the year, and how 2 years, right? Years. So I am just very impressed with JP Mint's knowledge, her professionalism, and just your ability to just strike out in new directions and succeed. It's really impressive.
Well, I do have
JP
a CV next year. I need you to doctor up for me and revisit. And I do. You did a great job with mine. Listeners, she doesn't do that anymore necessarily.
No, I still do. I just know that, with AI, I know that a lot of people are working on their CVs, and I could see that the potential more to help people and to coach people with interview skills, for example. That's something that AI isn't necessarily, I don't see AI helping with individual clients and working on their interview skills. That's something I'd like to branch into more so than the document editing, because the document editing is rather time consuming. And really now I think we can start utilizing AI for that.
The recruiting accent, recruiting point. Yeah.
If you make an AI make Greg and I look better in an interview, can it physically make us look better?
I've tried.
Hey, you guys look great in the new logo. Parrot and cat, you guys look great in the new logo.
But then you see us in real life, you're like, bring back the logo.
Did you see me? I'm a real redhead in that logo.
Hey, I used AI for that, and I think I did a pretty good job. I hope our listeners do. Speaking of listeners, you two, since we've gone through the three of us here a little bit to reintroduce ourselves, we need to take a moment and thank our listeners, right? They are a great crew all over the world, 130 countries at least. We're almost at 35,000 downloads in our lifetime of this podcast. We're at 108, 110 episodes. By the time they listen to this, we'll be around 111. What else, you guys? I wish I had more of the comments to read out loud on the show.
I can tell you that a lot of clients are listening to ITP and they reach out to me saying that they'd like some help with their job search. I can tell you they're coming from all over the world, and that they're both veteran teachers, new teachers, they're domestic, like local teachers wanting to go overseas, and some of them are already overseas and listening. And so I find it fascinating that our listeners have such a wide range of backgrounds and nationalities and, as I say, veteran and new teachers to this. So I, for one, love that our episodes fit everyone's life that way. They can
Right.
get
I would
something
like
out
to
of it.
add two things to what people have said about our listeners. Number one, if you like what you hear, no, this is not about money this time. Send us a
Get the
comment.
check.
Let us know what your thoughts are. We've got some very nice comments about the podcast, people talking about the guests they like, about the humor, the banter. Those are the type of things that is great feedback for us, because that sustains us and lets us know that you like the project, you like the product that we're putting out, and it keeps us wanting to come back for more. So please, if you like what you hear, send us a comment. We would even be happy to read some on the air. So please feel free to reach out and let us know. The second thing I want to say...
International Teacher Podcast at gmail.com.
International Teacher Podcast at gmail.com. I'm going to memorize that. The second thing I want to say is that Greg tells me that people are tuning into us on YouTube, but that after a minute, and I suspect after we've introduced Greg, they're dropping off.
Right. They see me and they're gone.
We
right?
want you to know that...
Just like before you leave, just like it first. Subscribe before you leave.
Like and subscribe and then leave after a minute.
We want you to stay for the whole show. The entire show is awesome. We're proud of it. Many people have told us that they really like it. So if you want to dial up on the YouTube, stay past our introductions, because I think you'll really, really enjoy the show.
And you'll learn something too, right? If you get past all the banter.
Yeah, you're going to learn something too. That's right.
You will be entertained and informed. It's two things for you, the price of one.
Well, what I've learned over the last month or so of research is that our show does have a lot of listeners, and we do have a great following. But if we do want to grow, if we want to spread our word, which is what we're doing, we're trying to spread the best kept secret. Kent, do you see how I did that? The best kept secret in education. We're trying to spread it out farther, right? Because there's a lot of other information out there, which I don't think is as genuine as ours is, because ours spreads the gamut. We have lots of interviews. It's not just the three of us saying opinions. And we have guests on because they are the ones out there also giving the different kinds of experiences and sharing stories and giving advice from their points of view. So I think that we are one of the best and longest standing as far as information highways for international teachers and people interested in it and people already doing it. Like you mentioned, JP, our listeners are out there. But in order to get more listeners, we have to have our listeners write comments, because we don't have a lot of comments. I know there's a lot of comments out there about Kent and I, I'm sure, at least, you being so handsome. But there's commenting on YouTube. There's Apple Podcasts. You need to subscribe. That's how the AI works now for the internet. And YouTube, they're following whether or not you're listening, but also, how many people are listening. So we don't care as much about the subscription or the likes or anything, because we're very happy with our audience. But in order to spread the word to more people and share and get more information spread out there, we need help from our listeners. And that's why I've become this new Greg guy, saying email us, give us a comment. We do love to hear from you. And there's different platforms that you can subscribe and like and comment, right? How did I say about that?
And we should point out that you could be a guest as well, because
please.
If you're listening to this and thinking, well, how do I get on the show? Please visit our website at www.itpexpat.com, and you can click on the little Be Our Guest. It's very Disney, very Belle and the Beast and the Belle. You can click on Be Our Guest, and that'll open a Calendly.
The Beast.
He's the Beast.
I thought I was
He's
the
the
beauty.
Beast. I'm the Belle.
I thought I was the beauty.
And you will see our Calendly, and you can pick a day and a time that shows up in your time zone and book us. It's
Tell
free.
us your story.
And come and tell us your story about heading overseas.
If you're more interested in the Greg or I, you could be a host. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, no kidding, right?
The possibilities are endless.
Auditions are opening
Auditions
next
are
week.
open.
We're running a sale right now. You can make as much money as we do, which is zero.
Well,
Love it. Oh, my.
Greg, let's do this. Let's do the around the horn. Greg, anything else you want to do to wrap up this special? It's been a special episode of the IT.
Very special.
I
Very
hate
special.
asking for social media stuff and replies. I just hate
No,
it.
don't apologize for it. It's natural. It's
No,
normal.
I'm just letting our listeners.
I do it.
I'm letting our listeners know that it's
money.
against.
Yeah, sorry.
That's what you want to talk over me? Keep
Oh,
talking.
yeah, I will.
Keep talking.
Can I join this
Love
party?
you, man.
Can I just
love
talk over?
I love you.
All three of us?
Yeah, there you go. No, I want to thank our guests, our guests over the years, our listeners over the years, and I do want to ask them to help us out by subscribing, all that stuff. I just hate it, right? I like just coming on the show, but in order to spread the word and to grow even more, it's not about money because we do this in our spare time for fun. This is our entertainment for other people, right? I'll say leave it at that. JP?
I would like to thank the two of you for having me on as guests and asking to be co-host because, as I say, this is always a bright moment in my week when I get to see the two of you.
Sorry, JP, can you say that again? We were too busy playing with balloons and confetti. We weren't listening to what you said.
You are my brothers from another mother.
JP, man, we love you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for putting up with us, JP. She's the boss anyway.
You know what? I can't. She could do so much better.
What about you, Kent? We know that, Kent. So do our listeners.
Please reach out. Let us know. We do this because we love it. We joke about it, but we're dedicated to bringing you this high-quality program for free. We love it, and we hope you do too. I'm Kent the Cat Guy. I want to thank my co-host, Greg the Single Guy. Thank you very much, Greg.
Yes, you're welcome.
I'd like to thank Greg. You can find his book, International Teaching, The Best Kept Secret in Education, at www.amazon.com, or wherever you find your finer books, and that's Gregory B. Lemoyne. So reach out and get that book today.
Choose a letter.
I'd like to thank JP Mint. Thank you, JP.
Thank you.
You can find her at JP Mint Consulting.
You always get her name right.
He knows who's getting.
We'd love to thank Jeff, the guy in room 1403 for being on the show. Thank you so much, George.
See you next week.